What is going on, investors? Hopefully, you guys had a great day out there. It's actually nighttime over here at the Investor Channel, and I could not wait to do a video on Pinterest, ticker symbol PINS. The company just reported their Q2 earnings, and I was going to wait till the weekend to mash up a bunch of stocks in one video, but I decided to separate Pinterest out because you don't see this very often. The company reported their Q2 earnings today. Now, before they reported the earnings, the stock was down 6%. So you think anybody had any inside info on what the numbers were going to be? Because in the after hours, after reporting earnings, the stock traded off another 19%. In combination, today alone, Pinterest stock is down 25%. Hello, that is just a massive down drop. And look, you see stuff like that maybe with meme stocks, certainly with like micro cap penny stocks. This is a $47 billion company, and it is down 25%. I thought this would be an interesting video, not only from a fundamental perspective, but from a technical perspective. When you drop 25% in the after hours, and potentially when we open up tomorrow, we got to talk about that from a technical perspective. Now, before we get in that, we'll talk about the Q2 numbers. We'll talk about why the stock dropped so much. You know, people leave me comments all the time, and I certainly appreciate them here on the channel. I try to read almost every single one of them. But sometimes people talk about things in the comments that the market doesn't care about. And so today will also be a lesson in understanding when you have a stock drop 25%, now all of a sudden what it does is it gives you clues on what the market actually cares about. Because when we get into the numbers with Pinterest, especially these financials, the balance sheet, some of this stuff is some of the best you'll ever see out there in a company, okay? And there's a reason why this company is worth $47 billion, although when we open up tomorrow, if you open up 20% down, you have to knock off another 20% on that valuation. But there's a reason why this company is worth as much as it is, because there's a lot to like here during the financials. But we'll talk about some of the reasons why this stock is down and why you should really pay attention to that if you're going to be an investor in Pinterest. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about here is if you're going to be an investor in Pinterest, you got to figure out what they're doing. And obviously they're in almost the exact same business. Everybody does it a little bit differently. Some of these businesses, especially when we're talking about a Google and a little bit of Facebook, have expanded into other categories. But for the most part, the vast majority, even when we're talking about a Google, 90% plus of the revenue is coming from people viewing, clicking, or making some kind of action on an ad. And that is the same for Pinterest. That is the same for Twitter, Facebook, Google, and Snapchat. We could probably throw a couple other companies in here, but these are your purest online advertising / social media stocks out there. And Pinterest is in this group. What I want you to think about is if you own Pinterest and for some reason you don't own Facebook or Google, then we're going to talk about that because I think you want to think about this over the long term. Now, I pulled up a price to sales chart here. This is basically every dollar in sales that Pinterest or any of these companies have. This is the price you're paying for those sales. Notice that Pinterest in this orange line is trading at 23 times sales. Twitter is the blue line, and that is trading at 12.5 times sales. I'll zoom over to Snapchat. They're trading at 33 times sales. And the giants in the market, the most mature but still growing very rapidly, we just did a video on Facebook where they grew their top line revenues by 56%. They're trading at a paltry 9 times sales, and Google's trading even lower at 8 times sales. But what this shows me is once you reach scale or a certain type of scale, the market's really looking to pay 8 or 9 times for your sales. At least over the last year, we've seen that been true. And even if you stretch it out a little bit longer, you see this green and this purple line, it's pretty flat. You see these other lines, they almost look like one of those heart monitors. They go up and down, up and down. This is showing you that the market is willing to pay 8 or 9 times sales, especially once your growth rate kind of flattens out and kind of evens out. So I want you to think about that. If you're an investor in Pinterest, investor in Twitter, and investor in Snapchat, is one of two things is going to happen. These companies are going to have to grow into these multiples, okay, and grow into 23 times sales. You start growing your sales and those types of things. This multiple comes back down closer to Facebook and Google because we got to figure this is where the market is going to price these stocks. So if Pinterest isn't able to do that, the stock is probably still, even today, overvalued by at least 50%. because the market leaders are trading at 8 and 9 times. I can imagine when this business gets really mature, those multiples will come down, and certainly people in 3rd, 4th, 5th place in this market, which I consider Twitter, Pinterest, and Snapchat to be, well, guess what? Their multiple is going to be even lower than Facebook and Google. So just want you to keep that in mind. Now, let's talk about the Q2 numbers. The one thing I think that jumps off the page that is absolutely concerning investors is here's our monthly active users, sometimes referred to as MAU over at Pinterest. The brown or the gray part, I'm like colorblind today. The international is in gray, and that's the bulk of their users, believe it or not. Take a look. Red is US, and this was last year during this time. You had 96 million monthly active users here in the United States. Well, guess what happened? Oh my goodness, it went down. It went down to 91 million. That is not good. At these social media sites, when you're paying 23 times sales, and Facebook is trading at 9 and Google is trading at 8, and all of a sudden your monthly active users in the United States, which I'll show you in a second, is their critical market. Even though it's less users, it is very, very, very impactful on the company. That went down by 5 million. And one thing that I want to show you here is the street was expecting 96 million. So it was expected that that monthly active user number, instead of being 91, it was actually going to be 96, essentially flat. So that is not good. The other thing that we're seeing here is the monthly active total for the international was expected to be at 388 million. And we see that actually came in really light too at 363. So this has some investors concerned. Remember last year, what was going on during Q2 2020? Most of us were at home, or a large portion of the United States and really the world were at home, maybe thinking of new ideas, stuff that they could do around their house, maybe activities they could do while they were wrapped up in quarantine. People probably had a little bit more time on their hands to be sitting around surfing on a website or an app like Pinterest, and we're seeing the impact of the last year of reopening, hurting Pinterest. Now, the last thing I want to show you is we talked about how the United States user growth really fell off a cliff. It was expected to stay flat. It fell off a cliff quite a bit, actually, by 5 million users. Keep doing that, all of a sudden this stock is definitely going to take an even bigger haircut. The reason why the US is so big for Pinterest is take a look at total revenues. Well, now international is just a small sliver of our total revenue, and look at how the U.S. plays into that. Take a look at average revenue per user. This is why the number of monthly active users is so critical with Pinterest, because if that number is dropping, well, they're earning even less. Look what they earn in international markets, like 14 to 36 cents a user. Now, I don't think those numbers will stay that low forever, but they probably will never get close to what the U.S. does. What is nice from what I'm seeing here is we grew from $2.50 per revenue per user all the way up to $5. And so that's fantastic. Even though we're seeing declines in US usership, we're monetizing that user very nicely. Now let's jump over the Q2 numbers. I think you're going to be impressed with some of this, but we'll also point out some red flags as well. We got the balance sheet here. There's no red flags here. Right-hand column is basically the beginning of the year. We cruise 6 months in. We got $2.1 billion in cash. Looks like we had about 1.7, 1.8 and change last year. You got accounts receivable. It's down a little bit. I'm not too concerned about that. It is potentially showing you that people are paying their bills over at Pinterest, which is actually pretty good. So you got another, what is that, 468 million in receivables. So all things being considered, this is a very financially healthy company. I want to show you that total liabilities coming in at $381 million. So they have more than that just in receivables over at Pinterest. The balance sheet, as you can imagine, it doesn't really get a whole lot better than that. Now let's turn to the statement of operations. So we talked about how user growth basically went down here in the United States and it stalled out a little bit internationally. But what I did show you was they're monetizing those users tremendously, okay? We went from doubled basically our average revenue per user in the US and not quite doubled it internationally, but bolted on a fair amount there. In fact, actually we more than doubled it. Sorry, my fourth grade math is not working late at night now. But let's take a look at the 3 months ended here. We got the right-hand column was last year. This is this year. We've got our revenue sitting here on the top line. It went from 272 to to 613 million. Okay, so we basically, what is that? Like you almost double, actually more than doubled your top line revenue there. So yeah, you're getting faster growth. One of the reasons why, look, I'm not silly here over here, but one of the reasons why you're paying 23 times for Pinterest, 12 times for Twitter, 33 times for Snapchat, which is growing very quickly as well. I know that Facebook just printed I think they were 56% growth. Google was, I think, in that realm too, but you're getting twice that growth. Actually, you're probably getting a little bit more than that, at least at Pinterest and at Snapchat and those types of things. So these companies are growing really fast, but if we start seeing this revenue growth start to slow, what's going to compress? Yeah, you guessed it, the stock chart, but also the multiple that the market is willing to give on these stocks. And so we'll see what happens. The reason why I keep going back to this multiple is Pinterest is going to be at 9 and 8 times one day. So you have to believe they will grow into that valuation. So the way they're going to do that is by accelerating keeping this revenue accelerated. That is why when you see user growth decelerate, I'm sorry, I had this on the right one already. When you see this user growth decline already, that has investors very concerned, okay? Because compared to Facebook and Google, Pinterest is way over, probably even close to 3 times overvalued compared to those stocks. And so they have to grow into this valuation. And if users are starting to peak, if not decline, I would be concerned if I was an investor as well. Now, we've got some other stuff that we got going on here. We've got research and development, cost of revenue. I love this company checks a lot of boxes, right? We got high top line growth. We love that. I mean, this is like a double up there. Cost of revenue is miniature. Take a look at what cost of revenue did. Okay, you doubled this top line. It's a little more than that, but you went from only 108 to 127. That is like what? Like 19, you only added like $19 million to your cost of revenue. That is amazing, okay? And so you love to see that. You got R&D ticked up just marginally, sales and marketing. So you notice, yeah, they really had to spend a lot of money to double this revenue, okay? They had to spend a lot on sales and marketing. But that can be a recurring thing, right? You bring in a new client to run ads on Pinterest, they test them, they go, well, that might be a client of yours for the next decade or two, okay? So to spend some money on sales and marketing up front, not that big of a deal. General administrative also ticked up as well, but not really that bad. Total costs and expenses went from 377 to 542, so not even close to like a double, probably more like in that 50% range. That gives us solid income from operations. Look, we were negative $104 million on the operating side on this company. Now we're at we'll just call that $71.2 million on operating income. I want you to think about this though, okay? So this company is going, if you annualize out this $600 million in revenue, you're sitting right around $2 billion in terms of revenue for the whole year, right? Because this is only 3 months. You times this by 4, you're at $2 billion and some change on that. And so, look, this company, I mean, it's got $47 billion market cap on it. So that's the one thing that you have to think about is, wow, I'm paying a lot for sales over here. The other thing that you want to think about is income from operations is sitting at $72 million. You average that out, you're at like $100 and some odd million. And again, you got a $47 billion market cap on this one. I don't think I have to explain to anybody any further. This company's really got to grow. They've got to grow big time to get into this valuation because like I said, the market will eventually rate this the same as Facebook and Google. And in my opinion, that would be lucky. It'd be lucky if this company could trade for 8 to 9 to 10 times sales. My guess is the second, third, fourth place online advertisers, which I think Twitter, Pinterest, and Snapchat are destined to become. They're not going to overtake Facebook. They're not going to overtake Google. I think everybody, even if you're very bullish on Pinterest, understands that. So you have to understand this multiple will come down. And it'll probably be under where Facebook and Google has to be. So this company really, really has to grow. So it does make some investors nervous. And that's why we see these like knee drop reactions. Now, from a cash flow per statement, I don't know if it's even worth looking at Pinterest, right? They got 6 months ended here. We pulled down that net income. They had $375 million, excuse me. That wouldn't be very much money. $375 million worth of cash provided by operating activities. Where's most of that come from? Really stock-based compensation. compensation. And I know some people think, oh, stock-based compensation, that's different. No, well, look, if you didn't pay these people with stock, you can't pay them with paper napkins or golf balls, okay? You got to pay them somehow, and it's either stock or cash, and in this case, it happens to be stock at the current time. The rest of this is just a flip-flop and kind of a balance sheet stuff. There's not much here on the financing activities. I promise you, you're not the Wall Street is not looking at cash flows when it comes to the cash flow statement. Looks great. I mean, this is like an amazing cash flow statement. This is an amazing balance sheet. The statement of operations looks actually good from the sense that they've controlled cost. Okay, I remember looking at Pinterest in the past, and cost have kind of ballooned with the company. They still hadn't really scaled them. The only thing we saw really grow rapidly was sales and marketing, which I have no problems with since it really delivered on the top line here as well. But maybe one of the reasons why they had to spend so much on sales and marketing is they had to get really aggressive because internally they saw they were missing the mark in terms of monthly active users, and they were missing the mark in terms of international user growth as well. So those are the types of things that you want to think about. Last thing we do is come over here to the stock chart. So this stock was way up here, 70 something bucks earlier in the day. I think started the day at about, 72, ended the day at right around $72 per share. That's way up here. Okay. Now we're dropping way down here. I actually drew a line about where the stock is. Not coincidentally enough, it pulls into an area that makes a lot of sense. So back in November, the stock really got, I remember we actually did a video on Pinterest back here. It was like 20, 25. I thought for sure we were going to fill this gap between 25 and 30. It never did. Okay. It traded sideways and then it rallied hard. So pat yourself on the back if you didn't take my advice and you ran your Pinterest shares up into more than a double, because in October, November, this was a $58 stock. It rallied super hard. Okay. Up to about $90 per share. And then it pulled back just a couple months ago, like back in May, back to 58. Then we rallied up again, and it looks like we're just coming back down here to 58. So it's actually a logical stopping point from a technical perspective that Pinterest is doing this. Now I put this top line in here, this top descending line right here. So I'll wave it around a little bit. I dropped this trend line in here because what I'm a little concerned about is if we stop here at 58, well, I think we probably will work our way back up here, but it might, if we don't exceed these previous highs, which are between 75 and 80, well, I think we might stop short, and then we just see the same thing happen with Pinterest. So I wouldn't be super excited to pull back to 58. The other thing that I want to alert you of is take a look at this price action back here. I'll kind of try to put a little bit of a box around it to kind of show you what I'm talking about here on the screen. There's some price action right here. This is right under $58 per share. Okay, right in this box is right under $58 per share, which is right where Pinterest is trading now. If you break this $58 per share, say the momentum just turns negative, not just with Pinterest, but maybe the whole market in itself as we go into Q3 and Q4 for a lot of these stocks, it's not necessarily the hottest quarter. So I could see some profit taking on Pinterest. Well, we pull back into this zone and there's not really a level of support till you get to about $45 per share. Just another $13 off where the stock is today. The last thing that I want you to alert you of, and I got a ton of lines on this screen, and so I'm going to take a few off before I make, this is a really, really key point to talk about on this last one. So if you're buying the dip on Pinterest, which I imagine a fair amount of people that are watching this video are probably looking to do, either you bought Pinterest at some point, doesn't matter if it's really higher or lower, you're looking to maybe average into it, or maybe take a 20% drawdown in this one to add to your shares. We have some candles up above the $69 level, and that's really what you're looking for a bounce at least to there, definitely over that. In fact, I think you need to get back over $80 to stop this shorter term downtrend that we are in Pinterest. One thing I want to point out though is up here at $70, there's going to be a ton of sellers. Okay. Because think about all these people that bought Pinterest stock above 70, which is about where the price was today. Well, they just saw their investment get wiped out by 20% tomorrow. So they may not sell tomorrow, but as this stock starts walking back to 70, they're going to be able to get out of it at a break-even type thing. They're going to have some really negative taste in their mouth about Pinterest, because when you lose 20% on a stock you just bought in the last couple months, and you've got other stocks that are ripping much, much higher than this, it's going to leave a very, very bitter taste in your mouth. So that's kind of what I see from a technical perspective. 58 is not a bad spot right here from a technical perspective, but me personally, I still see us in a downtrend on this one. So I would wait for this one to show some forms of bottoming. Okay, can it make a V like it did here? Certainly could. It's made some V formations in here, but you'd want to wait till we see kind of a bottoming pattern. I really wouldn't. We're recording this on a Thursday, heading into Friday. Pinterest will trade. I really wouldn't think about this one until coming back onto Monday. Sure, you might have missed a couple points on this one, but it might show you that yes, buyers are stepping in at this $58 level, because if they do not step in here at 58, there are some gaps that we will likely fill in a hurry, and that will take this stock down to $45 per share, which will compress that multiple even more and get it closer to Facebook and Google, and in my opinion, give you a better margin for safety. Because like I said, long term, Pinterest, Twitter, Snapchat. I mean, we're already seeing it with Twitter. Twitter's already inching down to where Google and Facebook are as a multiple, and it will keep going down. Twitter is not going to get back to a 20, 30 times multiple unless they really make some crazy changes with their website, which I assume is possible. But Pinterest, if you can get this closer to like a 15 multiple or closer to a 12 multiple like Twitter, gives you way more margin for safety, okay? For them to have a couple bad quarters, for them to introduce some new products, have some advertisers come on board. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. A lot of lessons to be learned with Pinterest. Hopefully we'll see more. Leave me a comment down below if there's a stock that's reported earnings over the last week you'd like to see me do a video on. On Saturday and Sunday, I'm going to be recording big mashup videos, probably a 2-3 hour video with timestamps that includes a lot of stocks that we were not able to cover in individual videos this week. Thanks for everybody for supporting the channel this week. It's been a big week. Hopefully you guys had a good one. Good luck with your investments.